In your predicament, the black character is always the first to die. I will spare your lives if you sacrifice the person you deem the blackest.
The blackest?
Shanika, she say nigga the most.
Nigga!
See?
I can prove I'm not the blackest.
Prove it.
I've never seen Friday. I voted for Trump.
What?
Twice.
The Blackening and also Elemental later in this video. Surprise! I'm doing something new and doing 2 reviews in one video. Very different films, but I saw them both and I don't want to make 2 separate videos right now, so let's start with The Blackening first. The Blackening is the latest film by the legendary director Tim Story of Barbershop and Ride Along franchise fame. He's an incredibly prolific black director, and blackness is a very important part of this film, hence the name if that wasn't obvious. The Blackening is a horror comedy ensemble piece about a group of friends renting a cabin for a Juneteenth party only to end up trapped inside by a blackface masked serial killer and forced to test their black history and media trivia. This is actually based on a skit that was done in 2018 by a comedy troupe known as 3P and just turned into a full-length movie. I was definitely expecting more of something like a haunted house levels of satire in this, but this movie surprisingly wasn't as over the top as I was expecting. It wasn't like Scary Movie where it's a random joke every couple seconds. It is still very funny and focused on referential and blackface jokes and references, but can be a bit too heavy-handed at times. Honestly, I feel weird critiquing this film as it definitely was not made for me. I'm not African American, as far as you know, but I still had an enjoyable time and laughed a lot more than I expected. I might have missed a few jokes or not fully understood why the theater was laughing so hard at 1 or 2 parts. I remember I had to ask one of my friends afterwards when we got out, going like, was Spades really that integral to black culture? I didn't know that. I don't know how to play spades, so that might explain some things. But I had a good time regardless, and that's the point of movies like these. I'm not going to go into the history of African American films or blaxploitation and horror. This is a review, not a history lesson, and that goes way back, all the way to Blackula, even before that. So I'll get a bit more on track. The casting in this is honestly really great. Everyone in the main cast was enjoyable, but especially X Mayo as Shanika and Jermaine Fowler as Clifton. Those 2 got the biggest laughs in my theater from their deliveries and their reactions to certain events and what they did in the film. I really like them. However, it's not a perfect film and it does lack a bit in some areas. The jokes are consistently funny until they start to lean a bit too heavily into slapstick. It's funnier when the characters are interacting off each other and how well they work together with their interconnected relationships. Thankfully, that is most of the movie. The other weak point is the plot. Unfortunately, it's just way too predictable. This was very much jokes first, plot later. There is no subtlety. The person you think is the culprit is probably the culprit, and the twists are seen coming miles away. That doesn't lessen the fun of the film, but it can be a bit annoying if you're a stickler for plot. It's just a weak plot excuse for jokes and tension. Even the main driving force of the racist board game the group is forced to play is abandoned barely halfway through the movie. That by itself is a baffling decision. I get it was supposed to be similar to Saw or Scream, but it just didn't work once the game itself stopped being relevant, and it does stop way too early. It does open itself up to a sequel, even with no end credit scene, but ultimately I'm satisfied with it as it is. Maybe some black people can relate more to it than me, but I enjoyed it well enough. If I were to fix the film, I'd definitely focus on the game more and tone down the slapstick. I like the characters, and I want to see them mess around with each other and talk more. The jokes are genuinely funny and smartly written. It's the plot that drags it down, which is a shame because a lot of films can benefit from going into this kind of setup a bit more, and it'd be a lot more interesting to explore what exactly is going on and more of these character interactions. These characters have a very long, obvious history with each other that they reference constantly, but you never really see it outside of maybe one flashback, so it'd be cool to have them more talking to each other as a group. I think that would just be a lot of fun. We get a lot of that in this film. I just think we could get more. Overall, The Blackening gets a 7.5 out of 10 from me.
And now for something completely different. Try this!
Dad, those are too hot.
I love hot food.
You see? He likes it.
Onto Elemental, a very different movie. Elemental is the latest film from Pixar. It got middling reviews and has people kinda sorta talking about it, mostly because of how poor of a box office premiere it had. Man, it's honestly difficult to really talk about this film. It's not a bad movie, by far. There's really nothing too wrong with this, but it's nothing new. This is an extremely standard Pixar flair, meaning this is another one where a cute thing, this time two cute things, learns a valuable lesson. There are no surprises outside of a glaringly obvious immigration and interracial relationship metaphors, which I just saw is based on the director's experience growing up in a Korean immigrant household. That's actually pretty cool. Elemental follows a girl made of fire named Ember, yeah, we're dealing with those kind of pun names, who is trying to run her immigrant father's store when a leak causes a water man named Wade, yep, Wade, to accidentally meet her. They form a growing romance as they try to solve the mystery of the water's appearance and whether or not two differing elements can even have a relationship both physically and emotionally. Yeah, it does tread a bit too much into Romeo and Juliet territory, but it surprisingly focuses a lot on immigration too, which I was not expecting. The fire people come from a place called Fireland and then speak the language of Firish, but speak with what I think is a Russian or Polish or Bulgarian-esque accent. So are they supposed to represent Irish immigrants or Polish or Korean like the director? I have no idea. It's honestly not that important to the plot. It's just a weird detail that I was like, what the heck's going on here? I guess it was made for the service of the pun. The film really wants to try to push both immigration issues and the relationship as its main story, but they don't really do anything new. Like I said, the film also has another plot point that is ultimately just dropped. That part baffles me. It sets up like an espionage plotline, but then drops it completely. Without going into spoilers, Wade and Ember discover something that looks like some third party caused deliberately, but then they never explore it. You're just meant to assume it is a natural occurrence and move on, and that makes no sense to me. It feels like a very important plotline, probably trying to delve into racism and hate crimes, but it had to have gotten cut halfway through development. It is bizarre, and the movie feels padded out because of this removal. There are several odd montages of Ember and Wade dating or one-off jokes that feel like they want to be running gags but never return. Entire characters that feel underutilized except for extremely basic story elements. It is really weird, and I have to question if Disney didn't intervene in the production somewhere. Maybe because the themes were a bit too on the nose or just way too similar to Zootopia's overall themes, but with a focus on a romance instead? I don't know. The city does feel very similar to Zootopia as well, but that's just design, I guess. It's interesting seeing how this was made for element people, but then you have the Zootopia city that was made for animal people, and you get that weird sort of, these things kind of look similar but they have different uses. It's odd, but they even have a gondola ride kind of sorta like Zootopia had. What is going on here? These similarities are just a little weird. Everything else in this film works though. The voice acting from Leia Lewis as Ember and Mamoudou Athie as Wade is top notch. They have absolutely great chemistry and they sound great together. The animation is also gorgeous. This is an incredibly colorful film that revels in the colors, especially when half the cast is somewhat transparent and you can see through them or behind them, and it's so cool, especially when one of them is literally light and has to splay out colors and light wherever she goes. That's really neat. I like that. It just looks fantastic. There's decent emotion in this too, but there's no Disney gut punch that Pixar's known for, or Disney. I think the last one Pixar really had was with Coco. I didn't cry in this movie. I didn't get choked up, but it wasn't terrible. I still felt the emotions, but it just wasn't that strong. I left thinking that this was just a very okay movie, but I got a little frustrated at the weird abandoned plot that to me felt very unresolved, but that's about it for this. I guess maybe save that plotline for a sequel. There's no end credit scene here either, and I don't really care to see what else happens to these characters, so maybe not. I feel like this really needed a rewrite. Bring back the drop plotline maybe, cut the weird relationship padding montages that don't go anywhere. That's how I would make it better personally, because there's a lot of improvement that could go into this. I just don't understand a lot of the choices that went in here outside of the puns, and I don't know, maybe the city could use a redesign too. It still looks good, but there's a lot of similarities to Zootopia. That is just a little weird. Maybe that's why that plotline got dropped, because it would have been too similar to Zootopia's anti-racism message. So I don't know. Maybe this was supposed to be like a Zootopia 2 and it got turned into something completely different. I don't know, but yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm pretty sure these stories are just way too similar. Ultimately though, this is a decent film that I just can't get over the weird plot and ham-fisted metaphors, so ultimately, Elemental gets a 6.5 out of 10 from me. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for a double review. I know one's a adult horror comedy and the other's a PG Pixar movie. Bring your kids to one and not the other one. I don't know. I just seen both of them and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to make a review on. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do both because I don't feel like I have enough material to really talk about both of them for a full review, because I like to go into background details. I like to go into production, and I just can't really get a lot of that with these without going way off topic into either history or going into Zootopia or all of Pixar's past movies, and I don't want to do that because I think it's just too distracting. There's definitely something to be said about learning about blaxploitation and horror, especially with films like Blackula in Pixar, with its films of Cute Thing Learns a Valuable Lesson, which is literally every single Pixar movie. If you want to count Lightyear, you can call him a cute thing, I guess. It doesn't matter. It's a thing or a person learning a very valuable lesson, which is a lot of films. Don't get me wrong, it is a lot of films, but it ties into Pixar just way too much, probably. Anyway, did you see either of these movies? What did you think? Tell me in the comments below. I want to know, what did you think about The Blackening? Did you relate to it? Do you understand most of the jokes? Which of the cast do you like the most? What about Elemental? Did you see that? Are you going to see it? Did you think the weird dropped plotline is odd? And do you think it's a little too similar to Zootopia, which I'm pretty sure is the case here? I'm repeating myself, but still, that's weird. It's weird. Anyway, once you're done commenting, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss a video. My socials are down in the corner there. Please follow if you want. And that's it. Have a great day, and if you're not, have a better one. See ya.
I'm just a ghost in your stereo, the fading memory of a shipwreck in the undertow. You're just a lost song on your own, and I'm just a ghost in your stereo.